I hadn't considered the orbital aspect because it does look rhythmic. I mean, I feel like I'm looking at a stock chart right now.
Yeah.
Like it goes up and it goes down, and when it goes up, you know it's going to go down.
Right.
But there's an anomaly that's happening right now with the carbon emission. Like I don't have an opinion on it other than looking at charts like this and talking to people like you, but I'm like, it does lead to the political idea that we have to change society and get green and all that kind of stuff, which is a big deal right now in the markets. Like there's a big Green New Deal. And you said that you would address it briefly, but I'd just like to put it in context for people because it feels to me like that the urgency of a long crisis that we're facing leads to bad decisions. And the analogy that I would tie it to, because I've been involved since my entire adult professional life, is trying to understand how we think that we could just spend money forever and not have to pay it back, right? I've been working on that for a long time, and there's all kinds of theories and stuff like that, but the debt just keeps going up, right?
Yeah.
And we're all aware that it's going up. And we're all aware that you can't spend more money than you have forever. And at some point, it's not going to work. So you can do it for a long time. I have quotes from like Alan Greenspan and Warren Buffett, like my own work, my own conversations with them, where like reputable people have said the same thing. Like, yeah, we know we can't do this forever, but at some point, it's just going to fall apart.
No, and
That's the same thing with climate, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's one of the reasons I've enjoyed knowing you for these 12 years and reading Bill's work for probably 20 years, and going to your conferences when you were doing them and speaking at them as well. And guys like David Walker, who you did the book with, former controller of the currency. David's a good fiscal conservative, I believe, but he gets climate change. We talked about that in Vancouver 10 years ago.
Yeah.
So these things are not incompatible. They make people fearful. But I'm totally with you that our economic policy is nuts. I mean, it just can't, it's not sustainable. We're bankrupting our kids. I'm totally aboard that. I do think, well, we can get to the Green New Deal in a minute. I want to show you one more graph and then we'll turn the graphs off, okay, if I can.
Yeah, that's great.
So this is sea level, the blue wavy line there, the squiggly line, since 1880, when we've had tide gauge records of sea level. And you can see it's generally going up. And if you look closely, it's starting to slope upward. And in fact, the purple line segment here is a much steeper gradient since we've had satellite data. Now we're rising at about 3 millimeters a year. And now in the last decade, we're about 5 millimeters a year. It's the rate of increase that's troubling. And if I show this one other way, and then we'll get off this, just since we've had precise satellite measurements of sea level, I'm putting in millimeters a year, which I can translate roughly to inches for Americans, but you have a global audience. But this is a really simple concept, whatever the units are. Since the satellite data of sea level, which is far more precise than a tide gauge, it was about 2 millimeters a year. Then beginning by the year 2000, it was 3 millimeters a year, 50% increase. Now the last reading here is 4.8, and actually we're approaching 6 millimeters a year. This is like an exponential curve almost. And this is the problem. And it's just like the pandemic. If you see the trajectory change enough and you know where this is headed, right? Or could be headed, I should say. That's the problem, so that we're clear. It's changing in the last 30 years, effectively doubling every decade. That's what's scary about sea level, because even at 6 millimeters a year, that's a quarter of an inch. Who cares? But let's follow this curve, and it's in my book. A quarter in 10 years at that rate would become a half. Next decade, it'd become an inch. Next decade, 2. Next decade, 4. 4 inches a year? that's 48 inches a decade, right? I mean, we're talking mind-boggling amounts, and it's happened in the geologic past. As I pointed out, 11,000 years ago, sea level was rising at 15 feet a century without human intervention.
Yeah. So that's what I find compelling about this entire narrative, right? Is that this is data that's recorded from satellites. So you and I are talking on Zoom right now. We're like dependent on things like Google and stuff like that. We believe in technology and in communication and all that kind of stuff. Why is it so hard for people just to look at the data and see that it's actually happening, regardless of the political motives or whatever? It's actually happening. So this is what I like about your work too, by the way. I want to say is that you consult with like municipalities and stuff, and you're like, hey, the water's going up.
And well, it's like economics. I mean, people can look at the same problem, and some people will say, give them $1 trillion. And some of us will say, we better start a new currency because the other one's worthless already. I mean,
Yeah.
there's a lot that you can look at the same information and have one of two reactions. I'll tell you who else likes to look at this, and a lot of your readers will respect, is the military. When I've taken the commandant of the Coast Guard or senators or assistant secretary of the Air Force to Greenland and laid the case out to them, as I'm going to get to do with you, I believe, this summer on one of our trips, and you get people's attention for 24 hours to really absorb this and ponder it without our normal daily distractions. And the case is irrefutable. I mean, it's a sobering case, and we've got to do something because this is our legacy, and this is not politics to me.